Yeah, so we're going to have some very quick conversations with council around the concept, particularly of campaign finance reform. I could not be happier about this. I've spent the last 15 or 17 years attempting to bring clarity and transparency and ethical conduct into the conduct of elections in Alberta. And I am so happy that the provincial government has opened the door to this. Now the devil is really in the details. We have got to get it right. Because the problem with campaign finance reform, speaking as someone who studied it long before I was a politician, is you really have to have a comprehensive view of it. If you just make one change, you end up inadvertently creating huge loopholes. So for example, before the 2007 election, the government put in one simple change, which is there had never been a limit on donations, and they put in a $5,000 limit. But the limit was much too high, because in the whole province there had only been a small handful of donations at that level. What happened is in the next election, that $5,000 became the expectation, and so the ceiling became the floor. And you had dozens and dozens and dozens of $5,000 donations, and you saw the average price of a city councillor election here in Calgary increase by more than 2.5 times. You went from an election costing about $35,000 or $40,000 to one costing north of $100,000. This year we had a councillor candidate who raised over $300,000. It is impossible for challengers to take on incumbents in an environment like that, so we need a whole bunch of changes. We need spending limits, we need donation limits, we need disclosure before the election, which was an issue in this past election. We need better enforcement of the rules. We need sunset clauses on when you can campaign. And it's important to do all of these things together. In particular, the challenge that the province is going to have on what they have put forward is they're bringing down the donation limits just a tiny bit. They're still way too high. $16,000 per donor per election cycle. Far, far higher than we see at the federal government or in other provinces. The other issue is that there seems to be a politically easy thing to do, which is to ban corporate and union donations. However, in the case of municipal elections where the vast majority of money comes from corporations in one industry, the real estate and development industry, and where many of those corporations are privately held, what that just means is that people could get dividends or a salary increase with the expectation that they would donate that money to an election campaign. So instead of me knowing that Joe Blow Development Inc. has actually donated to someone's campaign, all I know is Jane Smith donated to the campaign. I don't know where Jane Smith works. I don't know what her interests are. So banning the corporate and union donations in that way actually leads to less transparency rather than more in the municipal context.
So you said you're pleased about the process, but you did use the word terrible. What were you referring to then?
Yeah, the challenge is that what's been put out will actually make matters worse, as I've just explained. And I'm pretty sure that the provincial government is open to a more thoughtful conversation about systematic reform. It just has to happen fast, because if we don't get it in place this fall and we wait through a provincial election, then by the time you get around to doing campaign finance reform, incumbents will have been raising money for more than 2 years under the current system, making it impossible for challengers to challenge them. So we got to get this done quickly.
We heard some discussion about
Gotta
the
wrap
council
this up
perhaps
soon.
showing a united front on this issue. How important is it for municipalities in general to be on board and present a united front? Like, have you talked to Don Iveson, for example?
Yeah, I sure have, and it would be great if we could, but we also have to be realistic that councils are made up of people, not just ours, all of them, and people were elected under the current system. And it's hard for someone who has benefited from the existing system to really think hard about how you change it. You know, I have the advantage of having done this long before I was a politician, and I've run all 3 of my campaigns as though more stringent rules are in place. And I've spent less than my opponents in 2 of those 3 campaigns, significantly less. But I think that I am the exception that proves the rule here. And so as a result, I'm just not sure that putting this on municipal councils to make up their own rules across the province is actually going to lead to positive results.